This is the ultimate guide on who you should draft in every single round of your fantasy football drafts with roster construction secrets in the video. I've helped hundreds of people win their fantasy football leagues. I'd love for you guys to join us on this page. Just hit that subscribe button. It takes 2 seconds. But I don't waste time. In round one, you really can't go wrong with anybody. They're round one picks for a reason. Making that decision though, we're going with Jamaar Chase 100%. You can get him in picks 4 through 8. That's a great range to set you up later in the draft as well. He is 100% worth the risk. And if you guys have watched these videos, you know I tend to say keep your first 2 rounds pretty safe so you can take the risk on higher upside guys later in the drafts. But Jamaar Chase just isn't that. He might be more risky because him and Joe Burrow are coming off injury. You don't really know what you're going to get with this offense. Is it going to be top MVP level Burrow? Is it going to be a little lower than that? Is it going to take a while for this offense to get acclimated? You don't have to worry about that. It is Jamaar Chase and Joe Burrow. These are 2 of the top players in the NFL coming healthy into the season. But this is a guy that finished wide receiver 5 in his rookie year. Then the year after that, in his sophomore season, he played 13 out of 17 games and still finished as a wide receiver 12. And then we have last year, despite his injury and despite Joe Burrow's injury, which might be the most important one, he still finished as wide receiver 11. He is quarterback proof. But these finishes start confusing people and make him go as wide receiver 4 or even 5. But since 2022, he's led the NFL in targets per game at 10.9. That's despite the injuries, despite anything that's happened, and they have Zach Taylor in this coaching staff, and we know for a fact he does not like to run the ball. It's going to be even more pass heavy. And then you take into account that Joe Mixon is gone, and they have no good tight end. It's just him and T. Higgins because they lost Tyler Boyd. He's going to get a lot of work. But enough about the first round. You can't really go wrong. Round 2, Isaiah Pacheco is going to be this guy, and he's being slept on just a little bit for what he is. Now, I have to preface this by saying, yes, I'm taking Marvin Harrison and a guy like Puka over him in the early second round because a lot of the times they are first round picks depending on your league. So this is my favorite pick in this round. It doesn't mean just because I have Isaiah Pacheco on this list, he needs to be the first pick in the second round. I love his value because he's being drafted around the position in the second round. You can start Chase in the middle, then get Isaiah Pacheco in the second. That's a great start. Let me tell you why though. He was a top 5 running back in fantasy points per game in the second half of the NFL season. That is really what's important. I say on this channel a lot that the second half of the NFL season really depicts a lot about who these players are going to be the next coming year. But now he has even less competition in the backfield. Most notably, Jerick McKinnon is gone. All of that receiving work competition completely cut out of the offense. All he has is CEH in the backfield. He signed a 1-year deal, pretty much no money guaranteed. And outside of that, just a bunch of unproven, undrafted running backs. Again, no competition here. But on the other side, the Chiefs absolutely upgraded this offense. They got Xavier Worthy in the draft. They signed Hollywood Brown in the offseason as well. These are 2 great signings that's going to open up the field a bunch and create really good running lanes for Isaiah Pacheco because they actually have deep threat wide receivers now. And there's also the narrative that if this offense is a lot better, they can open up the field and win a lot more games by a lot larger of a margin. That leads to more rushing attempts and run-heavy scripts for the Chiefs. You love that for Isaiah Pacheco. But this is where it starts to get juicy in round 3 because I'm taking Jalen Waddle. And a lot of people are going to have a problem with this, so let me get into it. You can get this guy in the back of the 3rd round. That is an amazing value. And you look at him, you're like, I don't want to do this again. What are we looking at here? But he is one of the most consistent guys in fantasy football, despite all of the things he's been dealing with. He missed 3 games last season with injury. And honestly, it was more like 5 because he went out of games and then came back in a bunch of them with weird eye injuries, leg injuries, but he really missed 5 games of the season. But despite all those games missed, he still finished with over 1,000 yards receiving, his 3rd year in a row since his rookie year. Since he's been drafted, he's never had a season under 1,000 yards. That's really, really good. Even when Tyreek Hill came to the offense, we thought, oh, he's doomed. Last season he got injured. We thought, oh, he's doomed. Still over 1,000 yards. Guess what? Now he's going into his 4th season. Statistically, wide receivers in their 3rd and 4th season have the highest percentage of increase of value, fantasy points, and just boom potential. That's just a statistical fact. Tua will continue to rip this ball. There's no difference here. He was 4th in passing touchdowns, 2nd in passing yards, and you also do have that very off chance that Tyreek Hill does get injured. Now, you can't predict injuries, but he's 30 years old. That's kind of when the physical prime of wide receivers really starts to tank. I'm not saying Tyreek Hill's a bad pick. He's a great player, great pick. But in Waddle's 1 career game without Tyreek Hill, when he was on the team, he had 28 fantasy points. There is no limit to the ceiling that he has if Tyreek were to miss a game or 2. Jalen Waddle's a fine pick on his own. He's going to stay fully healthy this season, I hope. If he didn't miss those 3 games, causing him to have lower numbers and lower touchdowns, he would have easily been a top 15 wide receiver. Moving into round 4, though, this is really where it gets good. I'm going to give you 2 players. One, Cooper Kupp. He might not be there in round 4 depending on your league size and what site you're drafting on, but if he is, go ahead and snag him 100% of the time. Please do it. Recently, Cooper Kupp has been moving up draft boards, and it makes a lot of sense. He's healthy. He's coming into the season. People are realizing, wait, when Puka and Cooper Kupp were both healthy last season, they averaged the exact same amount of targets, 8.5 per game. And you also compare their fantasy statistics when they're both healthy. Puka didn't even average one full fantasy point more than Cooper Kupp. They're the same player as far as fantasy value goes. Now, yes, Puka's the young player. He had a great rookie season, but Cooper Kupp was also injured. I'm not saying Cooper Kupp over Puka, but he's definitely a value in the 4th round. He was playing through injury all last season. He's a guy that wants to do that. He missed 5 games, and he is 31 years old, so there is definitely a risk here. But you can't deny that if the Rams have a season like they're projected to, where they're top 15 in pass attempts, there's no way Cooper Kupp doesn't beat wide receiver 18. But let's say you don't like Cooper Kupp, or he's just not there in your draft position in the 4th round, go with Trey McBride, and this is a non-negotiable. The tight end dead zone is not a complete wasteland anymore, and you need to update with the times. There are 8 amazing tight ends that you need to draft. If you don't finish your draft with one of those 8 tight ends, you are screwed. You can always trade for more running backs and wide receivers. There's so many of them in the draft, but it's hard to do that with quarterbacks and tight ends because it's a 1-to-1 value and people can tell that they're getting fleeced. But McBride in round 4, when he's a top 3, even considerably higher than that at the fantasy position with tight ends, is a steal. Now, obviously, we have this offense being upgraded and fully filled out. They have Marvin Harrison now. They signed Zay Jones. But after week 8, when Trey McBride became the full-time starter, he averaged a 31% team target share. And Kyler Murray is still that quarterback. I don't really doubt that going anywhere. He loves to target his tight ends. Will Marvin Harrison and some of these other receiving options take some targets? Obviously, they will. But let's look at the stats. Last season, when Trey McBride was the full starter, he averaged 14.8 fantasy points per game. You want to know who the tight end 1 on the season was? That was Travis Kelce. He averaged 14.5. There's obvious upside here, and I love taking him in the 4th over guys like Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce in the 2nd, 3rd round. Travis Kelce's 35. I don't really see a world where the Chiefs run him to the ground with targets and usage because they want a three-peat. They want to make the playoffs and have success in the Super Bowl eventually. He needs to be healthy if they're going to do that. And Sam Laporta, he's going to have touchdown regression. It's almost guaranteed. That makes Trey McBride a great value in the 4th round. Going to the 5th round, the best pick in this draft round, it's going to be Kenneth Walker. And if you guys remember last season, I was downing him a little bit. Things change. You have to update with what happens in fantasy football and how the teams change, and this is a guy you need to be looking at. Right now, the only bad thing you can say about Kenneth Walker is that Zach Charbonnet is in this offense. Now, that is a real concern to some people, and I will say that Zach Charbonnet is the #1 handcuff you need to be having. If you're going to handcuff anybody, get him, even if you don't have Walker. Get Zach Charbonnet, because if Kenneth Walker does get injured, he's going to be a league winner. But that's besides the point. But all of the coaching staff that lobbied to go get Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round of the NFL draft, they're gone now. Walker is legitimately one of the best talented running backs in the NFL. He's top 5 in yards per carry, top 5 in breakaway rate. He's top 5 in elusiveness. Like, all of the advanced metrics show that he's a great running back. And you can tell if you watch the games. He just has to stay healthy. And the coaching staff and the beat reporters, everybody has been saying he is built and he is ready for this 3-down role. I think he's going to improve in his usage, improve in his time on field. Zach Charbonnet is going to be a feature back, not as much of a receiving back primarily as we've seen him. Yes, he's going to take some work in the receiving game, but Kenneth Walker is going to get those receptions. He's going to be a 3-down back, and he's going to get touchdowns. While it might be a little bit low, he has the chance to be a top 5 running back in fantasy if all goes right. I'm taking that in the 5th round. And just to put it into perspective, even if you don't think he's a top 5 running back, he's being drafted as the RB16 after finishing as the RB19 last year. The team has only gotten better as far as coaching staff goes and schemes. But in round 6, we're going with a quarterback. I love Kyler Murray. If this, what I'm doing right now, can be my draft so far in fantasy football, I'm going absolutely crazy because this is an amazing start. You're getting Kyler Murray in the 6th. He's a quarterback with rushing upside. When you draft quarterbacks, especially in this day and age of fantasy football, you need to make sure they have rushing upside. If you want them to have any potential of finishing top 5 and having a high floor and high ceiling, that's what you want. Why do you think Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are going as the QB 1 and 2 in fantasy if they're not the best quarterback in the NFL right now? That's because they can run the ball. And we get that with Kyler Murray in the 6th round. He runs the ball a bunch. He was an MVP candidate. You got to remember that. He has an upgraded offense, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison, all these guys. And the most important stat that nobody really takes into account here with Kyler is that the defense literally sucks, bro. Their defense is absolutely terrible, which means Kyler Murray's going to have to pass the ball a lot more. They're going to have to run a faster scheme because they're going to be down in games because their defense can't stop anybody. That is how you create great fantasy players. That's how you win leagues. Go get Kyler Murray. But in round 7, this is where the true league winners start to be found. In this range from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, this is where we found Puka. It's where we found Nico Collins last year. This guy's Deontay Johnson. I'm sure you've heard enough people talk about this. 90% of fantasy football casuals will look at this and say, not again. I don't want anything to do with the Panthers offense. Bryce Young sucked. Their offense ranked 32nd in every metric. No. But that is not the mentality you can have in fantasy football. If you had that mentality, that made you miss out on Breece Hall finishing as the RB2, Mike Evans finishing as a top wide receiver as well. Deontay Johnson is the same receiver, the same guy who was a wide receiver 1 in 2021 with the Steelers, elite volume. He's a great route runner. But what changed? Actually, a lot of important things changed. The coaching staff is already in love with him, and the Panthers made a good amount of coaching staff changes. They brought in Dave Canales. If we look at what he's been able to do over the past few years, he took Geno from a role player to a top quarterback in fantasy football and regular football as well. Left them, went to the Buccaneers, made Baker a player that's never been able to get his footing, never been able to be a top guy in fantasy, at least never top 25, turned him into a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Now, he goes to the Panthers with Bryce Young. Am I saying Bryce Young is going to be a top 10 quarterback? No, but we can also look at the facts. In the last few decades, there's only been 3 quarterbacks that were picked number 1 overall that did not pan out in fantasy football. Number 1, Trevor Lawrence. In his first rookie year, finished as the quarterback 29. His next year, finished as quarterback 11. Next, Jared Goff finished as the QB 32 in his first year. Finished as the QB 11 again. That third player, Bryce Young, finished as the QB 31 last year. He's going to be a lot better. He's got a coaching staff around him that can produce. That's going to help Deontay a lot. Last year, Bryce had no weapons. It was Adam Thielen and a bunch of nobodies. That's not a top receiving core. Now they have Xavier Legette. They obviously have Deontay Johnson going as the wide receiver 38 in the 7th round. If you don't think he can beat that ADP, you're actually crazy. But moving into round 8, this is where all of the players do have a little bit higher of red flags, but it's where you find the league winners. Number 1, I'm going to give you 2, Javonte Williams. And he completely flipped his narrative in the offseason so far. In the beginning of the offseason, people were saying he's not going to be a workhorse. He's really not built for that. They have some other options in the backfield. Well, no. The narrative with the beat reporters, with the coaches, they're saying he looks like he can take a huge role. He can be a 3-down back. He can be a receiving back. And Jaleel McLaughlin will not take usage from Javonte. Yes, he might still be using the receiving game a little bit. But again, like Zach Charbonnet, he's not going to take it. And if you really are worried about him taking some kind of usage, if you look at this Sean Payton's offense for the last 10 years, he has had the most condensed backfield with targets. Since 2013 all the way up to last year, his backfield has been top 5 in the NFL in targets out of the backfield per game. It's just a fact. He's been doing it for 10 years. Nothing's going to change. And if Javonte Williams gets that receiving role like he's slated and looks like he's going to get, he's going to way outperform this 8th round ADP. And you also can't ignore that Bo Nix has been looking amazing in camp, so that's also going to help you there. But speaking of rookie quarterbacks, Jayden Daniels is the 2nd player in this list. This is no Commanders bias. Trust me, I do not trust this team whatsoever, but Jayden Daniels is one of those players that can be absolutely amazing in fantasy, even if the team isn't great, kind of like an Anthony Richardson. Like I was talking about before, you want to be taking shots on these rushing upside quarterbacks. Yes, he has a lot of risk. He's going as quarterback 13 though. He's projected for 35 rushing yards a game and 5 touchdowns on the season. I personally think that 5 touchdown line is way too low, but 35 rushing yards a game, that's like 4 fantasy points extra on top of what he's going to already do. That's a safe floor. He was one of the best rushing quarterbacks in college football of all time. He has a great deep threat ability. He can thread the needle there, and that matches his play style with Terry McLaurin. They're lining him up outside the numbers more than they ever have, which means a lot of deep balls are coming his way, and Jayden Daniels is good at that. But in round 9, we were taking the running back from the Bengals. That is Chase Brown, and everybody was on Zach Moss in the beginning of the season. I'm here to tell you that was never a thing. Zach Moss only had a couple good games with the Colts. You really can't, for running backs especially, take a couple game sample size and just think they're the best running back in the entire NFL. It's not true. I won't lie. In those games for JT when he filled in last season, he was a very good running back. But Brown has real upside and breakout potential. Now, obviously, Joe Mixon isn't there. That's the reason we're talking about this backfield. But if we look at the play style of these two running backs and what the Bengals want to do, Zach Moss is more of a pass blocker. He's not super elusive. He's not super great athletically compared to Chase Brown. Now, yes, he is a young player coming into his 2nd year, but he already had 1 year to get acclimated to this Bengals offense behind Joe Mixon. They got him a little bit of usage before. He wasn't great with it, but I do trust him to be this running back out of the backfield over Zach Moss in the long run of this season. And you also look at the fact that, yes, the Bengals brought in Zach Moss, but it was a 2-year deal for $3 million. That is backup running back money. That is nothing more than like a filler player that they need to pass block. But beat reporters and coaches from training camp and preseason are saying that Chase Brown is doing a lot better in pretty much every stat and every facet of football that they thought he was going to be. He looks like he's on the right trajectory to be that number 1 back, and that's what you're going to want in the 9th round. Take a shot on him. But moving into round 10, 2 deep sleepers you absolutely need to target. Number 1, TJ Hockenson. Number 2, Jerome Ford. And stick with me on this one. Yes, TJ Hockenson is coming off a pretty serious injury. He's going as tight end 11 in round 10 though. Take him up in the draft, stash him on your IR slot. Again, we don't play fantasy football for the first week and a half. We play for the fantasy playoffs, and that is where TJ Hockenson is going to come in and absolutely dominate for your fantasy football team. And he's a good enough talent that he can still be fantasy viable even with Sam Darnold. But let's look at Jerome Ford, because this is a guy you can use now, and I would use now, and I have a strategy to drafting him. The thing you need to do with Jerome Ford, draft him in your fantasy league round 10 plus. Let him play a couple great games. Nick Chubb is not going to come back anytime soon in this season. Jerome Ford will be that starter for a few weeks, if not months. and that is where you're going to get the advantage. You pick him up in the 10th round. He's a great running back starting player. He was top 15 last year without Nick Chubb, but then you can flip him for much more value because he's going to be the RB1 with no Nick Chubb. There's no backfield competition outside of him. And they also have a great offensive line and a great defense, so all he needs is for Deshaun Watson to be somewhere near average, and they're going to have to run the ball a lot because their defense is stopping everybody. If they can score, that means they run. But that is going to finish off this video. If you guys want a deeper dive into real fantasy football sleepers in round 10 plus, go ahead and comment sleepers in this video. And if enough people comment it, and I'll make a video on the actual deep sleepers in round 10 plus. I love you guys. I appreciate you watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one coming soon.